I met Lester back in January of 1980. It was a long time ago. And the impact it's had on every aspect of my life has been nothing short of extraordinary. You know, we all know that as we go through life, there are challenges and difficulties and tough moments and all that. And so what's happened as a result of my meeting Lester and learning his process of releasing, letting go, is that as I've navigated through life's inevitable twists and turns and difficulties, I was able to maintain a sense of centeredness and calmness throughout that has enabled me to make better decisions, remain present, and always land on my feet, whatever was going on. There's just a deep knowing that everything's okay, that things are unfolding as they should. And this was the wisdom of Lester's teaching and the wisdom that results from the releasing, from the letting go, from the process that he shared with us and shares with the world. And he didn't actually know what happened to him at first. He had to do a little bit of reading and research to understand what had happened to him. But he stumbled upon the process and took it to its ultimate conclusion and realized the truth of not only who he was, but the truth of who we all are, because we're not different, we're human beings. And so after that, his life became about sharing what he had seen and what he had learned with others. The most important message from Lester, it's actually pretty easier to answer that. And he would say this all the time. And for me, it would drive me crazy because there was a part of me that knew it was true. And there's a part of me that wasn't seeing it. And what he would say is, you already are that. Everything that you are seeking in the world, happiness, joy, peace, that's your basic nature. So there was a part of me that resonated deeply with that because it was a small part of me, but it was sort of touching upon a truth that at some level I knew. But the frustration with it was I certainly wasn't experiencing that because my experience was, well, I'm not experiencing happiness, joy, and peace inside. I'm experiencing challenges and difficulties in life. The beauty of his teaching and the extraordinary, profound insight of Lester's understanding was this almost a key to how do I experience the truth of what he said? And so the releasing that he taught us was how to let go of the wants, the desires, the things that we're seeking in the world, which at first didn't appeal to me because I wanted things in the world. I wanted success. I wanted to have more money. Those things were important to me. And, you know, having a great family and all that. What I learned was, as I was letting go of these limitations and the negative thinking, what was happening in my life, things were getting better all the time. Things were getting better and easier. And Lester would say, abundance is the natural state of things. If we let go of our negativity and our feelings of lack, abundance shows up without effort. Now, that sounded great, but would it really happen? But the beauty of Lester's teaching was that you don't have to believe any of that. Take the process, begin to let go, and experience truth for yourself. If you like it, do more. If you don't, you can stop. I don't know anyone in my years of releasing, and I've taught releasing to thousands of people, who ever didn't love releasing, who didn't love letting go because it allows us to be freer. But with that teaching, I began to discover the truth. It took me a while because I'm going to admit, a slow student. But what I discovered was the truth of what Lester said, that the more of the limitations we let go of, the more sense of lack that we let go of, the more we recognize our true nature, our true being, happiness and joy. And then, so life becomes beautiful because things flow more eloquently, more beautifully, more along the lines of what you want. And when they don't, when things happen, you're okay with it. So you begin to live in this place of peace and joy within, for no reason. The greatest happiness that there is happiness for no reason. That's what Lester taught. Lester spoke these truths, but more than that, he gave us the tools so we could each discover it for ourselves. And he challenged us to do what he had done. It wasn't just, look at me, I'm this great wise guru who has the answers. Lester pointed people to themselves. It was never Lester about me. It was, look at yourself. And the greatest joy of being around Lester was he saw you as that perfect being. He saw your true essence, and you could see yourself in his eyes. And it wasn't a cognitive experience. It wasn't something that I could say, oh, that's what's happening. I'm seeing myself in Lester's eyes. It wasn't that. It was seeing something in him and feeling something in him that I saw was in me. I felt it was in me, so I saw what was possible. But the beauty is that his teaching lives on, and his teaching is all you need. It's the key to undoing this mess we've created for ourselves in our minds and all the limitations we've added on. So his pure teaching was, you already are that you are seeking. You already are that. So it's not a matter of becoming this infinite being. It's a matter of undoing the conditioning of the mind so that we can recognize what we already are. That's really what it is. And part of his teaching was, when you quiet the mind, your true self will be recognized, will be realized, will be revealed when the mind gets quiet. It's almost like if there's a pond and the surface is very turbulent, you're not going to see beneath the surface. But when the surface of the pond gets still, you can see to the depths. That's what releasing does, allows you to see to the depths of who you are. And it's truly the greatest discovery any human being could ever make. And it's what all of us are looking for. Whether we know it or not, we're looking for that ultimate happiness. So as we begin to release, we feel happier, freer, and lighter, and life begins to flow more and more in accordance with our deepest intentions. So all of that is wonderful. But what happens then is, so we're living a better life, not complaining about any of that, but we get caught up in that, and we still see ourselves as this limited being. We still identify as being this limited being. And ultimately, that's not who we are. So to the degree we're identified as this seemingly separate self, there is suffering. There are things that don't go well. So the real goal, the realization Lester had, and what he encouraged us with every way he possibly could for us to do when he said go all the way, is just keep releasing. And when you feel wonderful and great, that's fine, but go beyond that. Discover your true essence beyond that. Let go of the attachment to experience and good things. And that scared the hell out of me. Why would I want to let go of my attachment to good things? But I did it anyway, eventually. It took me a long time. When I did, here's what I discovered. The good things, the best part of life, it doesn't go away. It's thoroughly enjoyable, but there's no attachment to it, which means you're freer to enjoy it because you're not worried about it going away. And your happiness is not conditioned upon what happens. Anybody can be happy when things go well, but when things don't go well, when things are happening in the world as they are now that are very disturbing to people, being able to be at peace with all that and accepting that because you know who you are, you know your true nature, that's a great gift. You know that you're ultimately not this body or this mind. That's just a garment you're wearing now. It's a vehicle you're in. But ultimately, it's not who you are. But that only matters if you can see it and experience it. To believe it doesn't help. Maybe it's a good start, but it's experiencing the truth of our eternal nature. That's where real peace and happiness lies. And in that, you can thoroughly enjoy life. You can thoroughly enjoy it. There's one other story I remember about Lester that touched me very deeply, and it was shortly after my father had died, and a group of us who were in the teacher training, we were in Phoenix, that's where the office was at the time. We went out for lunch, and I happened to be in the car with Lester, and we got back to the office, and before we got out, he said, "I want to ask you a question." "Sure, what is it, Lester?" And he knew my father had died maybe a few weeks earlier, and he said to me, "How are you?" And he asked it in a way where I could feel the love of a father for a son. Like, how are you doing? With such love and such caring. And I was so moved by that. I felt like my father was present in the car with us at that time. And just like, "Are you okay? You're going to be okay. This is fine." And I told him in that moment, and I was very moved by it. I had a dream about my father the night before, and I shared it with Lester. And I said, I saw him. He looked wonderful, but we never spoke, but there was something he wanted to tell me, and I don't know what it was. And Lester said to me, he wanted to tell you that he's okay, and that he doesn't want you to think of him as being gone because he's not gone. And ever since that moment, I realized my father was not gone. And it's a wonderful connection I still feel with my father to this day, but it was Lester's gift and Lester's understanding that to not think of not separate myself from him, but to feel that connection. From a different point of view, we can see beyond it. He said, when you can see beyond it, it will just follow your thinking. And so there would be talks stories of him teleporting. He'd be somewhere and instantly he'd be somewhere else, or water appearing where there was none. Those kinds of things were fairly common for him. And at first, I listened to them with a certain degree of skepticism because that's just how my mind is. Over the years, I came to know people who were with Lester in those days, and they would share things with me that absolutely corroborated everything he was saying.
I spoke about Lester coming back down, and one of the ways that he did that is he watched TV all the time. And he watched the news, of all things. He watched the news. And he just would sit in his chair. Somebody had gotten him a sheepskin for his chair, so he sat in his chair and he watched the news. And sometimes I would go to pick him up to take him somewhere, and he would be there with CNN. It was early days of CNN, and he would be watching it. And that's how he brought himself down. So he always knew what was happening, and many times he would use what was happening in the world as part of the teaching, to illustrate the teaching. After a few weeks, I started to volunteer in the office, and so I spent more time with him, and there was a group of people who would go and have dinner with Lester at a little restaurant nearby. And so I would go. When my friend would call and say, Lester's going to be there, I would go. And he would talk about things. And oftentimes it wasn't about releasing. It was maybe about what he did in a business or something. But I would be triggered through some little thing he said. And I would go home and release and release and release and release. And I realized much later that he was doing that intentionally. And it was a great gift, because I started to see what was blocking me and what was stopping me, and it was a great help. So that's how I began to spend time with Lester. He would be talking to somebody across the table, and I knew he was speaking directly to my heart, directly. But if he had turned and said to me what he was saying to that person, it would have been too confrontive. But I could hear it. He was a wonderful teacher. In that way, he knew what you could handle and what you needed to have, maybe in a little bit of around the bend way. Yeah. But he told a lot of stories. He would talk about the strangest things. He would talk about how McDonald's had the best coffee and why. He would talk about they had a glass pot and it was fresh every 10 minutes and they had all these systems for it. I realized much later he was teaching me about business and about how to be effective in the world. And it also triggered things in me, a sense of inadequacy, a sense of, I need to learn these things. There were many things that were triggered. And I began to teach. I took teacher training starting in 1984. And Lester would spend some time with us, and the director of training at that time, Virginia Lloyd, would spend some time with us. And it was very profound teaching, because essentially what they did was show us what was left. And you just had to keep releasing. You couldn't coast, because there was always the next thing that, oh yes, that's there too. that's there too. And letting it go created a whole new awareness of what was true and what was real. And the feelings were just passing through. The wanting, the desire was just passing through. What was real was always there. It is always there. I always know if anything happens that's an upheaval in my life, that there's something underneath causing that. But for the last, I don't know how many years, things fall into place much more. I mean, occasionally there's something that passes through and I recognize that it's old and it's leaving. But I remember Lester saying, he would say to us at that time, you don't want it. He said, your life gets good and everything straightens out and you want the joys of the world. And they're not true joy. And I can remember him, it almost felt like he was disappointed in us and he didn't really, and that's probably projection because I don't think he felt disappointment at that time. Maybe he did. I don't think so. But he really wanted us to want freedom. He really was, that was always what he was doing. When he spoke to us, it was always bringing us to heading toward the right direction. And it was always for freedom or imperturbability, as he called it. To me, it's freedom. Oftentimes when he said things, he was talking to me or to whomever he was speaking to rather than about what it appeared to be. He was trying to trigger something in us. But what he said about all that was that they stopped releasing and they would only release when he was there. So he broke it apart. And it stirred a lot of people up. You know, it really stirred a lot of people up. And I think when he worked with us, we were stirred up, but in a good way. It was always apparent that if we kept releasing and uncovering, that the freedom was being uncovered, that's what was happening, that we were cleaning the mirror, so to speak. Yeah. Oftentimes, we would be sitting in a little cafe, that's usually where we were, when he was talking. And he said numerous times, you know, I always say the same things. And one of the main things he said was, thou art that. Meaning, you are the truth of it all. You are that, capital T. And he said that a lot. We were sitting there talking about, you know, the political situation in the world at the time, or whatever it was, how to make coffee at McDonald's. He told us about a chain of restaurants he had in New York around the time of World War II, and how he made them a great success. And as he was talking about this, he was communicating so many things, keeping it simple, not getting caught up in too much complexity. His menu was very small. His atmosphere in the restaurants was very cozy, and you could get your lunch very quickly. He only had stools, I think. I don't think he had tables. And so people came in, got their meal, ate quickly, and left. And he tried to serve them very quickly so they'd come for lunch. So a lot of the lessons that were taught were about the principles underneath. And it always brought us back to peace or to freedom. That was always the lesson. And he would talk to us about things, ways that we could become wealthy or successful or whatever. He always talked to me about real estate. And that was something I was drawn to. And a friend of mine, he talked to him about the stock market, and he was drawn to that. So it was interesting to spend time with him. I remember when I was first releasing, I was always afraid I was just going to be a blob and I was just going to do nothing. And the piece is not like that. There is, I wouldn't say it's passive. It's action at rest. And if there's a need for action to happen, it happens. But it's not like we're trying to make things happen. We're not pushing, we're not efforting. We're actually at rest until action is needed. And then it's very easy and very simple to have it happen. Yeah. That's why I think life is so pleasant when you've released the old conditioning and the old programming. You don't become someone you weren't. You become more of who you are. Your talents are freed up. Your creativity is freed up. He really liked Yogananda, and somebody came once from Yogananda, and I said, "Oh, he's from Yogananda." He said, "Well, it's about time he started sending people. I've sent a lot of people to him." And there was a quote from Yogananda that says, "The world is like this one flower," and he said, "It's very beautiful, but every part of it is poison." And, he was trying to encourage us to go all the way, not get caught up in the world. And yet he would also go to people. I have a friend who has several children, many children, and Lester would go to him and say, you can be in the world, but not of it. You don't have to give up your family. You don't have to not be part of the world. You can be part of the world and still be free. Yeah. We always have been, but we forgot. So in the letting go, we remember more and more of what we are and what's true. It's a wonderful way to live because we're not fighting the world. We're not fighting our family or our friends. We're letting them be. And we're enjoying how they are.
In the very early days of learning to release and releasing, laughter was like the way of letting go. So I didn't know that until I took the course, but there was always this tremendous laughter. So I'm with my friend Judy. I had just picked her up at the end of the first weekend, and we were actually on a bus on 3rd Avenue going to a movie with some other friends. And then Marcia whispers something in Judy's ear. All of a sudden, there is this tremendous laughter erupting from Judy. Judy, she was a performer, and she had just this enormous voice, just this enormous, beautiful voice. And all of a sudden, she is laughing and laughing and laughing. I start laughing, our friends start laughing, and then the laughter starts in the front of the bus all the way back to the bus. And all of a sudden, the whole bus is laughing. And it was really my introduction to releasing. In terms of how releasing basically saved my life. I had really found the bottom in my life, emotionally and action-wise. So learning releasing and really using the process, the releasing process, to undo all the stupid decisions I had made from the time I was born, it really saved my life. Saved a lot of people's lives. A part of me felt that because Lester was around her, Lester was here, that was not a guarantee, but that meant bad things would not happen. Boy, was that wrong. Because it wasn't about making things good. That was okay, but that wasn't his goal. His goal was to help us realize what he realized, to realize the complete totality of what we are. And he did it in some very interesting ways. Supposedly, he had cancer, but he took no medication. He took no painkillers. He was always still more interested in others. I told this story in New York. Because he was homebound, they were visiting nurses, house cleaning. We had a woman who would come in, wonderful woman, come in and clean his apartment. And whenever she came in, Lester would give her his full attention and listen. And she was having a lot of trouble with one of her kids, maybe all of them, or it was a relationship. Her life was really a challenge, and Lester would listen and try and help. Listen, maybe say something. Listen, maybe say something, but never talk at her. It was really very beautiful. He tried to make the visiting nurses as comfortable as possible, not give them any trouble. Really tried to make it easy for them. When I would visit every day, he would say to me, "Tell me your gains. First thing you do, tell me your gains. Tell me," and by gains he meant any positive benefits from releasing. And he felt they were important, but I think it was something special to me because he wanted me to see the confirmation, get me to see the benefits, the benefits of my releasing. And it was helpful. It was helpful. I appreciated the direction.
He didn't have a preaching sense. He didn't ask you to come back with he was giving you a gift, a meal, If you take of it, it's of your choosing. And so that's the most I can say, is that that freedom was part of who Lester was in everything. I got a phone call about 5.5 years ago from my doctor on December 22nd. And she said, "Sylvia, I have never given a message like this in my life. But if you do not go to the hospital immediately, you will either die, have a heart attack, go blind, or have a stroke." So I wasn't doing anything, so I went to the hospital. When I got there, a nurse came up to me when she said, I had a pituitary tumor in my brain. And she said, "I had the same thing you have, but I got pregnant and it disappeared. So I told the doctor that I wanted her treatment." However, what happened in that moment, that she said she got rid of it, I used Sedona. I used the releasing technique. And I just released it. And what happened is my tumor consumed itself and disappeared.
Wow.
A year and a half ago, I had a subdural hematoma, which is when you crack your head open. And when you have a subdural hematoma, usually the blood runs quickly, and wherever it runs, it destroys your brain. In my case, it congealed. After it congealed, it consumed itself and it disappeared. And I've gotten rid of diabetes, I've gotten rid of kidney stones, and when I recently had some blood on my left hip, the doctors don't know what it is. They say, "Go home and heal yourself."
How did you
It was
release?
the simplicity with which the nurse said to me, she says, "I got pregnant and it disappeared." In that moment, and I am an actress, so I do relate to people very strongly. In that moment, it just internalized what she said to me, and I gave it back out again. It wasn't verbal. It was trusting in what she said, and trusting in my own trust. I didn't know I was doing it. I just did it. And that's the secret. Just do it. He didn't let me know that he was teaching me. Even when he asked me to head Sedona, was such a shock, the Sedona being the institute itself, because I never thought of myself high enough in those terms. But it was like he was seeing what I wanted to be, not necessarily where I was, because I certainly didn't follow through. I can tell you this much. I found him to be a very loving man. The shy, I found him to be self-effacing. He didn't do any of his magical tricks to make me grow, because maybe what I needed at that time was just love. He gave me what I needed. And I think that's true of any master, is that he taps what people need and not what he is.
Yeah, good.
Didn't say not meditate, but it's the idea of don't, if you're just wanting to get high, you can go off in the clouds and everything. But in fact, even when he was doing the meditation, he said, meditate with quest. You have to have a question. You can't just, I'm the infinite beingness of the universe, and how nice, and blah, blah, blah. But,
what do you really want to know? Who am I? What is this world? You know, what am I doing here? What is happiness? All these questions that he asked himself. He said, anything you really want to know, when you concentrate on it, you get it. Like any great performer, musician, actor, whatever, knows that concentration cracks the secrets of things. I guess you all know the story of how he would stick his finger in my palm. Some of you do. Anyway, every time I would shake Lester's hand, he would stick his finger in my palm, you know, like suddenly snapping at a sexual thing. And I said, why is he doing that all the time? He kept doing every time. There was never a time he didn't do it. And I thought, that's very strange. Then I realized he's trying to tell me something. I was so involved in my sex fantasies and so forth. And one day I'm about to shake his hand, and I figured he's going to do that. I'm going to be prepared to pull back. So I put my hand out. With his other hand, he grabs my wrist and holds it as he was strong, as hard as he can, and sticks his finger into my. I'm down on one knee on the floor trying to get away from it, and he's digging and digging. And he winks at me and finally lets me go, you know. I mean, he knew how to make a point.
Is that what he was doing?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You know, it's sort of, to thine own self be true, when you're talking to people or whatever group you're in, and people say, oh, but it's this way, we got to take care of this and that. This man lived what he taught, and he proved to me that nothing needs to be controlled. Sylvia talked about driving with Lester. That was an experience. I'll tell you, if you had any want of safety, you didn't drive with Lester. There'd be an inch on both sides of go between two cars. He would zoom through at 60 miles an hour. And he was there very calm, you know, sort of watching you in a sense. And how he impacted me. All I knew is that whatever he had, I wanted. And I think what he tried to show me is that I already have that. There's no becoming any of this.
So how do we do this without a gun to our heads?
Step one. You know, step one of the method, like must want freedom more than you want anything.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's the one you want to. But the interesting thing about the method is we are in control. It's our decision. Either I want to control or I don't. It's my choice. Either I want approval or I don't. It's my choice. I want to be safe. First of all, the only thing we want to be safe from is our own thinking. So how stupid is that?
Yeah, I mean, just sharing your own experience of what life is like now. I mean, you met Lester. Yeah, what is your reality now?
My reality now? Well, I was telling a few people here, I just wrote a book called How to Be Your Beingness. All blank pages. My reality. How to get me releasing. There you go. Just ask me a question like, how's my reality now? It's amazing. I'm looking out at everybody, and I'm just enjoying every one of you. I never thought I'd see the day when I remember the early days of my releasing. I'd go to a retreat, and I'd have a big release on wanting approval, let's say. then I'd look around the room and I'd think, gee, I hope everyone noticed that I let go of wanting approval. And now I couldn't care less. You know, my sanity depends on me allowing the rest of the world to be crazy. And I'm probably just as crazy as everybody else. The difference is I couldn't care less how crazy I am, and therein lies my sanity. So I think that's one major difference that Lester has made for me. Well, I have to take responsibility. I have made for myself. But I remember the last time I felt something I didn't think I could handle. I had Lester's picture. I talked to him every day. I looked at Lester's picture. I said, Lester, you have to help me. And this is only a few years ago. And I distinctly heard him say, an infinite being doesn't need help. So that was the last time I asked him for anything. Anyway, it's what I discovered. It's fun loving people. It sure beats the alternative. Yeah.
Ralph, I think I heard you say a couple weeks ago at Michael's birthday that what he represented to you, what that was.
Oh, when I think of Lester now, he represents my free self. You know, it's not there's Lester out there and he's going to do this or that for me, but he is me. I mean, I see myself in 3 stages. I think I mentioned to someone before. My first stage, when I first started this, I was totally hating myself. I just realized I was the world's worst, and that's why I wanted so much approval. Then I swung the other way. I wouldn't want to be anyone but me. I felt really good. Okay, this is really working. Boy, am I glad I'm me. And now I find myself in a 3rd stage that everyone out there is me. And that includes, I was looking at Lester's, but I'm still putting him separate from myself. No, he represents the free me.